Cosmolocalism is a model of looking at the world which says everything heavy should be more local and everything light should be more global and shared. We have done so much globalization and it's really not sustainable the way we've been doing it. A certain measure of localization is necessary, and by doing that, we can diminish our weight on nature.
Today with us is Michel Bauwens. He actively works with researchers, governments, and agencies to explore ways that digital layers of the planet Earth and peer-to-peer layers can potentially create a more collaborative society structure into the future. So today our conversation's focus will be on the relational grammar and cosmolocalism. Beep, beep, beep. In front of you lands a spaceship, and out walks a friendly alien. If you were to use one word, one sound, or one movement to invite the alien to play, what would that be?
Well, I would do what you just did, which is like this. I honor the God in you. Let me just tell you a little anecdote. I've been twice to the Vatican, and I actually saw the book that I have about the position of the Catholic Church towards aliens, and it's exactly that. They say that if they exist, they'll be children of God just like us. So we have to treat them, with the same respect as we would treat a human person. Just a little anecdote, and I think
I love
that's
it.
we shouldn't prejudge who they are and what they are, and see, just open up a normal relationship and see where that goes, I guess.
It's beautiful, yeah, because we are all coming from this whole universe, and we don't know how big this universe is.
Right.
So to honor that very fact is, I feel like, is not only correct but also divine. It's very intentional. Beautiful. Wow, cool. All right. So relational grammar, like, what do you mean? Like,
All right.
why?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
what is this? What
I'll
it
try
is
to
and what it is not.
I'll try to explain it as simple as I can. So first of all,
Okay.
I'll just mention the name of the person who spoke about this first, which is Alan Page Fiske, Fiske. And it's a very boring book, The Structures of Social Life. I don't recommend reading it because it's like a catalog of, but his thesis is very simple. There are 4 ways of dealing with people that have existed throughout time and in every region of the world. And they occur in different mixes. So the first one, he calls it communal shareholding. And it's whenever you exchange something with a whole. So let's say you're a hunter-gatherer society, and the hunter comes back. It's not going to sell it. It's going to be for his family, for the whole, right? And then within the family, they will have a method of cutting up the animal and who gets what, the rules for that. So or like an Amish person, when they get married, right? The whole community makes their house together. And then the expectation is that you are also going to help other new couples when they need to build their house, right? So there's no
It's
direct
nice.
exchange. You are doing it for the community, as it were. And the
Mm.
logic is very simple. Give a brick, get a house, right? By contributing to something that is common, it's better for everyone. And that is actually the primary way that humans live for basically a few 100,000 years. When they're in small groups, it's the primary thing. So once you settle down, you can't just flee when you have a conflict. Now you have to live, you're doing a bit of agriculture, horticulture. Once you settle down, how do you keep the peace? And that's the second modality. It's called equality matching. It's commonly called the gift economy. And basically, I'm going to give you something to make you in a good mood, basically, and you will feel that you have to give me something back. And so that's how we keep the
Oh,
peace, creating good relationships, giving gifts to each other. It's often confused with the commons, and it's different because here you actually expect something back. And the way it's called equality matching is because it's a paradox, right? If I give you, I actually become superior to you because I gave you something. I put myself higher than you. So if you want to reestablish the relationship
I
on an
give
equal
some
level,
back to you.
you have to give something back. So that's why it's called equality matching. But it's the gift economy.
It
Like
does
the
create
northern.
some sort of stress, though.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah. It's
somebody
not
gives it
just.
to
So I'm
you,
not
then
saying
you feel
these are
like,
like ideals, right? Because, for example, if you say an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That's the dark side of the gift economy, right?
Mm,
You demand retribution, called retribution. I've done you harm. Now I have to restore the harm I did to you. Yeah, and it's
mm,
either like if I blinded somebody or your family, you expect me to blind myself, so or to give money to
I've
compensate. So that,
yeah,
yeah, and that
side and the
existed for
light side.
thousands of years. This was how the law worked. Even in medieval times in Europe, that was still mostly how the law functioned as a retribution. Yeah,
And it's also part of like human nature. Like when we think somebody give us something automatically, biologically
yeah,
even, we feel like we need to give it.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
And those two modalities, right? They're the first ones. They're like they've existed for the longest time. So but then something happens, and what happens is, maybe there's a climate change event, maybe there's some catastrophe, and I cannot survive. I have to get something from another people, right? So I'm going to invade you. And of course, in that context, reciprocity doesn't work anymore because now it's more like a protection racket in a way. So I'm the master, and my group rules your group, and I will protect you from other people who also want to invade. And in return for that protection, you'll pay taxes. So that's called
So it's
authority
like a
ranking.
colonization.
Yeah. So that's basically, feudalism, tributary systems. So authority ranking means you get according to your rank, right? So, if you're a count or duke or a king, you get different things. Everybody can expect like to have a certain standard of living depending on their status in society, right? And it's associated with the state, with the creation of the state. And once you have a state which can protect the safety and the security of people, then you get the fourth modality, which is markets. Communal shareholding, equality matching,
Safety.
authority ranking, and the market pricing. That's the way Fiske calls it. And there is a history to it, right? So they dominate in a kind of historical succession, but they always exist. Just, for example, think about dating today, right? Dating today is a market because market
Mm,
pricing is now dominant. So, you pay for a dating site, right? So dating has become marketized, right?
mm.
So that's how it works. And so here's a theory from a Japanese guy called Kojin Karatani, or I think there they say the opposite way, Karatani Kojin. And he wrote a book called The Structure of World History. So mode A and B is mode A is the two first ones, right? Mode B is the state, mode C is the market. And here's what he says. We are designed anthropologically, genetically to live in mode A. That's really what we want.
Mode A.
Remember, for thousands of years, we lived in families and clans, right? We know everybody. Everybody we know is good to us. They're family. And the enemy is outside, maybe, right? And so it's convivial, and we know the people around us. We trust them. We can ask them things. So that's kind of this peer-to-peer idea. We can exactly. And so here's what he says, and it's very interesting. Humanity always wants to recreate mode A at a higher level of complexity because we don't really like civilization. Civilization is alienating. Now you have classes, and some people are on top and some people are at the bottom. Some people are slaves. Some people are domestics. You live in a big, dirty city with people you don't know, and you don't know if you can trust them.
And everybody is so
Civilization
stressed because they want to climb all the
civilization is
ladders.
richer materially, but it's also alienating. And so we're always trying to make civilization softer, right? So first we do that through religion, right? So the early civilizations were very brutal. It's all about fighting, conquest. And then you have what we call the axial religions that happened like 600 BC, more or less at the same time in the whole world. So you have Buddhism, Taoism, Fusionism, Greek philosophy, Hebrew prophets, they all kind of emerge at the same time. And it probably has to do with urbanization and stuff, right? Because it's weird that the whole world moves in the same direction, more or less at the same time. And so they want to make the world more ethical. So now you're living with strangers in a complex society. Let's have religions so that the warriors who go out and conquer and pillage outside, they shouldn't do the same inside. So basically the priests are there to civilize the warriors. On behalf of society, they create ethical rules and law so that everybody has to behave in a certain way that is more human in a way, right? Inside a particular society. So that's the role of religion, right? Is to kind of soften civilization, to go back to harmony. We should love each other. We should respect the environment. We shouldn't cheat. We shouldn't lie. All these things, right? And uh, then Karatani says the second moment is when, at least in the West, we stop believing, mostly, the majority of people no longer believe in religion. So now we do it through mass politics, right? So he says, once we stop believing in the other world, in the vertical aspect of transcendence, going beyond ourselves in a divine world, now happiness lies in the future. So it's like we collapse, right? We collapse it from the vertical dimension to the horizontal dimension. So there's now, then there's a big change, and then we will be good. So socialism, anarchism, fascism, liberalism, they all promise a better future and kind of paradise where people will be, better together, but in the future, if we do X
In the
and Y.
future, yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think actually this is ending as well. So if you look at history, you could say, 1789 with the French Revolution is the moment that religion loses its primary role. From now on, change is political, right? Before 1789, people would fight about the right religion. After 1789, nobody fights about the right religion. Religion has become a private thing. Now people fight around communism versus capitalism or something like that, right? So the right way to organize society, it's a political fight. And I believe right now we are even moving away from that. And we're moving in a third stage where the yearning for mode A, if you like, to return to this conviviality that we like, is expressed in constructive networks. I'm already making a bridge to cosmolocalism here, right? Constructive
Yep.
networks. So if you want to change something, more and more people no longer believe they can do it at the level of politics and society. The trust in politics is very, very, very low. Nobody trusts the media, the Congress. And so if you want to change, you have to find like-minded people and organize your life differently. And it's no longer like the family. It's going to be like by
Right.
affinity. Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm engaged in is there are millions of people in the world who are changing their life, by going back to the countryside, creating new kinds of farming. And so we're in the midst of a new type of change, which is not a political revolution anymore, but is, and even Web3 and crypto, these are all networks of people that construct something together, right? And so you can look at history as this, it never works out the way people want, but people keep trying. We need a better society. We need to be more friendly with each other. We need more peace. We need more justice. That is something that is part of our being. And so maybe I want to say one more thing. So, you have these 4 different ways of dealing with the value. And if we are in one, we behave in a certain way, and we can move in the other, and then we behave in a different way. So think about a mafia boss, for example, right? Like in the mafia, he has to be very tough. People have to obey
Yeah.
him. And if people,
Very
don't
clear
obey, you
rankings.
punish them. But these people can be very good fathers and mothers because once they go to their family, they can actually be very different. They love their daughters and their sons, and they're not going to treat them in the same way that they would treat the people who are members of the gang. So that's important. When you're in a market, you behave in a certain way. When you're in a commons, you behave in another way. And to a certain degree, it determines your behavior. So you can design society in a different way. And so I believe in the commons as a way to design society in a different way, not instead of the market and the state, but also next to it. But here's the thing. Markets and states are very efficient in some ways, but they're extractive institutions. They need to produce a surplus, and they're competing with other institutions that want the same. And so they always tend to overextend themselves. There are studies about this. Every society until now has collapsed. There's no counterexample, right? Societies
It's
are
hard to
cyclic.
sustain always the
Yeah, they
surplus.
don't. They always overuse their resources and then they collapse. And then something else comes back. So it's this endless cycle of, and now we have a planetary system that's destroying the whole planet. And the commons was the counter-cyclical generative institutions. So the commons is, for example, in a village in the Middle Ages. It still exists, but let me give you an historical example. So you're a farmer, you have your own plot of land of your family, you have to work for the Lord in exchange for protection, but you also have common land with all the other farmers in your village, where, for example, you have an agreement that your animals can graze there on Mondays and your neighbor on Tuesdays and that neighbor on Wednesdays. So they make these common agreements, and it's like a social security system when you don't have a state. It's how local people kept the balance. And you find it in every civilization, whether it's China, Islam, Christianity. And under Christianity, the third most important festival was called the Rogentide procession, where all the villagers would walk around their village and reconfirm their commons. And it's called beating the bounds because, they would use these white markers that we still have, on the highways, right? And they would say,
Yep.
this is from us. And so it was very important for their identity as parishioners that they had these commons, these local commons that they collectively managed, right? So then we have the digital coming. So you could make a history of the commons. Let me very briefly do that. So first commons were physical pastures, mountain slopes, things like that, right? Under capitalism, we don't believe in that. Starting in the 16th century, we do something called the enclosures, and we basically say everything has to be private. So we start fencing property, and we abolish the physical commons. So all these farmers have to flee the countryside. They come in the city. And, in the beginning was very cruel. Early 19th century, if you were working class, you die when you're 35. So they
Because
could
of
really,
heavy labor demand, like
yeah,
why?
hyper exploitation, child labor,
I see.
no insurance, no pay, work
Oh,
18 hours a day until you fall down. It was very, very hard. And so that lasted until like 1850, when people like in Manchester, Birmingham, they were dying when they're like 35 or 40 on average, which is less than they used to live before, where they lived maybe 50 or 55. So before it got better, it got worse. But so what the workers did was create a social commons, right? They mutualized their risk. So they created insurance, fraternities, unions, and that became controlled by the state. So the welfare state is basically you take all these things that were invented by the workers and you make it a
distribute.
civil rights, and now it's for everybody, but now the state is doing it for you. And that's very different, right? Because now you don't control it anymore. It's something you get from the state as a passive consumer. So the third phase of the commons is the digital. 93, we invent a browser. We invent, and so now we have the web and the browser, which means everybody in the world can share knowledge. So we create shared knowledge commons, free software, shared code, open design, the Wikipedia, everything. And I would argue we are now entering a phase where the digital is mixing with the physical. It's becoming so important that we can't do anything anymore without this layer of shared computing. And that's what I call Phygital, right? So here comes cosmolocalism. And sorry, I am answering you before you ask the question. Cosmolocalism is a model of looking at the world which says everything heavy should be more local and everything light should be more global and shared.
What do you mean by heavy?
So matter, right? So humanity today spend 2 or 3 times more on transport than on making. Like when you eat shrimp, right? The shrimp is fished in Canada or in the Atlantic, right? They send the boats to China.
Transport
The Chinese
to.
workers clean the shrimp and send it back to the US, right? A tennis ball has like 400
Oh, I didn't know that.
components and has like, if it takes 40,000 miles to make like one tennis ball, right? We have done so much globalization and it's really not sustainable the way we've been doing it. So I think a certain measure of localization is necessary. And by doing that, we can diminish our weight on nature by 2/3. And so, but it's not
What kind of
localization.
things?
We can, like, it's a choice basically. So there was this company. Now it didn't work yet because of the prices are still very low, and so it's still hard to compete with this model. But I'll give you an example. This company was called Arrival. So they reduced the number of processes to make a car from 750 to 50. And you have robots, right? And you just order your car and they make it locally when you order it. Just on a platform, they make the car for you according to your specifications. So the designs are available in the whole world for all, these company outlets called Arrival. And then you make it. And, there's like a lot of drones are made that way, maker spaces, some computers are made that way. There's examples. I'll give you a really nice example in India. It's called Solar Lamp. So Solar Lamp is an open design, right? So that means it's shared globally. Everybody in the world can say, I make a solar lamp. So you have to invest in a small factory and you can make these solar lamps. So what they do in India is they give these solar lamps to poor students in the villages that don't have electricity. So 4 billion kids can now study at night and do their homework because of solar lamp, right? So then they made an agreement with, it's called ITT, it's like the MIT in India, ITT Mumbai, and they made these free short courses, 10 minutes each, and 400,000 students can now study university level exams using open source education because of the solar lamp, right? And then, of course, maybe 4,000 can actually go physically to the university. So this is a marrying open design with local physical production, right? So it's distributed manufacturing is basically what we are looking for. Not big factories that make 1 million cars and send them all over the world, but having these small factories everywhere in the world to make a number of things locally. And you can make biodegradable materials, circular production methods. Anyway, so that's kind of the model of cosmolocalism where, so, okay, I'll give you so this is my last article, right? It was called The Geopolitics of Cosmolocalism. And I talk about the archipelago of regenerative villages because cosmolocalism means trans-local organizing, right? You should look at history as you have physical entities like nations, villages, and then you have non-territorial entities like the church, the Pope and the Caliph. They're not the head of a territory, they're the head of a community. Wherever Christian Catholics live, they should listen to the Pope, right? Whenever Muslims live, they are connected to the Caliph. There's no Caliph right now, but that was the original idea. So we always had these territories that are managed by, towns, cities, kingships, monarchies, countries, nation states. And then we had non-physical communities, right? That are kind of like united around common ideas.
Common
Have
idea
this,
and value, beliefs.
yeah. And so now we have this extraordinary technology, right? Allows us to organize translocally in real time and share designs and share production facilities in an entirely new way. So I think that the balance between the two is changing. So the balance between the physical world of nation states and these new type of communities is changing. And that's what I'm kind of following and trying to understand. And so we talk about network states, network nations, all these new things that are emerging.
What is regenerative society?
So the problem, I think, of the current system is that it's not good at taking into account what we call externalities, right? So if you're a company, your aim is to make as much profit as you can. You have to. That's the law. Like if you're a corporation, you have a duty. And if you don't do it, then your shareholders can actually attack you, right? And so that means that everybody is trying to serve their own interests. And then in theory, the state has to regulate that. And I would say that worked more or less until the 1980s. But in the 90s, we had the first wave of digital networks, and it was used basically by finance to become global. So now we have nation states, right? where the state is supposed to regulate the market, but it doesn't work. They're too weak to do it. And so we have a regulation problem. And that's why nobody trusts the government anymore, because they're weak. They can't really solve, because a lot of issues have
Because
become global. Yeah.
because the limitation, I think there's a conflict or a mismatch between what the state is designed to do, which is very local, and now with everything that is becoming phygital with this digital layers and this
Exactly.
global
Exactly. So we have a regulation
impact, it's
crisis.
hard.
And then the question is like, how do we solve it, right? And we
Yeah.
have basically three models that are competing. One is the Western model, which is market centric, and basically the Global Economic Forum, the WEF, right, the World Economic
Mm,
Forum.
yep.
Their idea is to have multi-stakeholder governance. So you have 400 domains like education and transport. So they have identified 400 sectors. In each sector, you have people from finance. They're the strongest. You have official NGOs, and you have weak nation states. And they try to regulate and create rules for the whole world, which is what a lot of people don't like that, right? Especially
Yeah.
if you're a Republican or a populist, you call them globalists, and you don't like that because they want to basically run the world globally. And so what about
Yeah. Still
democracy?
feel like
So people feel that they're losing their power to this process. So then the other thing
mm,
is, the other side is basically, Russia, China, and the BRICS, right? And they want to have stronger states. They want, in a way, go back to the older model,
mm,
strengthen the state. And the Chinese and the Russians and the Indians, they talk about the civilization state. Not so not a pure nation state, which is a European invention, which is secular. They want to go back to their history to create a stronger identity, and then have these states negotiate together. And
mm.
so that's what the basically the BRICS countries want to do. You recreate a nation state model, slightly
Mm,
adapted and without the domination of the West.
mm.
And what people like me want is that create a capacity for local communities to manage themselves, but to become stronger through trans-local coordination. So the archipelago idea. You know what the archipelago is? It's the idea that you have, for example, islands in Polynesia or in the Caribbean, right? They're all separate, but then they send out boats to each other. They make friendship, and
It's like a commons, like people just operate in
yeah,
terms of
yeah, yeah.
that, like we're all
Uh,
together, we're
Yeah,
we're
or
helping
or
each
in
other.
oasis in a desert. So they're quite autonomous, but then they create links with each other, right?
Feels like the motivation of that is very strong because they are each of those groups are isolated and they need to survive together by coming
Yeah.
together
So
as
and
if. So
now
it's like
you would
by
see it, for
survival even.
example, people who want to do permaculture, or people who want to do collective purchasing of organic food. These are agreements between consumers and groups of farmers, right?
Mm,
So
mm.
And all this is now called bioregionalism, right? So bioregionalism is a very powerful and fast-growing movement where people say we have to restore our territories to health. That's what regeneration is, right? You have on the one side forms of economy which pollute and destroy your environment, and then you have other, people saying, no, this is no longer working. We're destroying the planet. So now we need forms of economy where we actually make the soil better, and we have more trees, and so how can you create an economy that actually makes things better instead of just destroying them, right? So that's what regeneration is about, and there are millions of people doing it. The press doesn't talk about it, but I can tell you, for example, in France there are now 1,500 eco villages, and 10 years ago there were only 150. And you have to know that
1500.
80% fail. Yeah, so from 150 to 1,500, and you have to know that 80% fail. So that means to have 1,500, you had like maybe 10,000, right? Because it's difficult to do. It's not easy. Land prices are very expensive. And so in order to be stronger, if you do this, you have to connect horizontally with all the people doing different things in your bioregion. But you also have to organize cosmolocally. All the people doing the same things all over the world can help each other. All the people doing permaculture can learn from each other at a global level. And so if you're attacked let's say, a hostile nation state that doesn't like what you're doing, or transnational finance that doesn't like what you're doing. Now you suddenly have both a horizontal and a vertical layer of solidarity and of coordination, right? You can actually coordinate together, and so become more efficient, right? Because in order to win, you also have to be better than what you're replacing. You can't just be idealistic and say, oh, we're going to do, well, if it's 10 times more expensive than toxic food, you're not going to win. So you have to find other ways so that you can do organic food and you can be actually cheaper than the bad food. It's not easy to
Because
do,
it's
right? Because the whole system is against it. But here's the thing. The thing is that the existing system is working less and less. And so it's giving more and more opportunity to people who want to do different things to actually do it. And now we have this whole technology that we can learn very, very fast now, and there's studies showing that we learn 8 times faster now than 20 years ago. A very bad example, making what's it called, IEDs, explosive devices, right? So it took the Taliban 20 years ago, it took them like a year and a half to learn how to do it. If you would do it now, it'll take you like 4 weeks.
because everything
Because
is already
everything is
open
internet.
sourced. You
Yeah,
can just
with
find it.
movies. I live in Thailand, Burma is next door. Okay, that's a bit complicated. Let me stage it first. So you have the invention of Bitcoin, right? The first socially sovereign currency in the world. And in order to work, it needs an accounting system, which is called the blockchain. The blockchain is the first universal ledger in the world. So this is, instead of everybody having its own accounting, you can now have an accounting between a whole ecosystem. So you can see the impact that you're making. This is a real revolution as well. Okay, okay. So then there's a project called Ethereum, which is to create a computing system based on the blockchain. Okay, do you still follow me? And
Yes.
this thing is
Closing my
working.
eyes definitely helps.
Yeah, and this is what we call Web3. So Web3 is the attempt to recreate a fully distributed computing infrastructure. So like the internet was meant to be, but also to protect it so that it doesn't degenerate. And so tens of thousands of people are working on this. So I went to, it was called Dev Connect in Bangkok, 20,000 people and 800 side events. So this is huge. I'm just telling you, this is huge, right?
Yeah.
Many of these people are nomadic, right? They work in different countries because they just have to work on their computer. And so what they create is pop-up villages when they come together for 6 weeks, a month, and they learn from each other. So it's amazing. You'll have like 20 sessions a day. You can choose where you go. And there's so much learning in such a short time.
Who is organizing all that?
It's self-organized, so you have different brands. One is called Edge City, one is called Zuzalu. I went to Zuzalu, Montenegro, and I tell you because this is what I wanted to tell you. It's an anecdote, but it's important. So I was sitting on a table with a collapsist, someone who believes that we cannot solve the climate crisis. Everything is going down the drain. So the best thing we can do is, help each other out while we're going down, basically, right? Then you had an impact investor. It was someone who invests in green technology. And then we had a climate denier. Someone says, no, there's no problem. There's no climate change. Everything is going well. So these people, in many other environments, they're ready to kill each other. Basically, I'm exaggerating a little bit, right? But
Mentally,
they're like
mentally.
they're political enemies. Well, in this environment of Zuzalu, they're talking in a very friendly way around the same table. And I said, wow, this is rare. And it's because they're all building an infrastructure that will be good for all of them, right? So they unite against their open source, around their open source commons, because they know they're making something that will be good for everyone. And that creates unity in the diversity. So that's, I think, the force of the commons is that you can do that. As long as you and I are contributing in this, something we believe in, you can be Asian, I can European, you can be, a socialist, I can be a capitalist. We don't care because we're building something together, and I need you and you need me. So I think this
Beautiful.
is the beauty of the commons, that you can do that. It creates, a capacity to unify people around common goals.
That's beautiful. So your magic. So when Michelle was about 11 years old or even earlier. What did he enjoy doing, creating, or playing so much that time disappeared?
I can tell you exactly. So I have to tell you, I had a bit of a difficult childhood. So I was an only child from two orphan parents that didn't have a lot of skills, interpersonal skills. And I was also taken away from my parents when I was 18 months old. I had asthmatic bronchitis. I remember, pretty horrible things like having to eat my vomit, being in a glass cage, having long nails like this. So I had a pretty tough childhood. It took me a while to work on these things, but I can tell you exactly what I did because I was alone a lot. And in Belgium we are crazy about bike competitions, right? The sport, yeah. We it's like football. We follow it. We have these competitions, and who's gonna win. And I would spend hours and hours like imagining my own, and you could buy these little bikers, and they have a number, and I would invent my whole world, and I would do this for hours and days and do my own competitions. That was the thing.
So you have imaginary competitors when you're
Yeah,
biking.
yeah. And I know it sounds a bit weird. Maybe people are gonna think I'm crazy, but I still do that. So before I sleep, I construct a world, and I have this planet, and I'm building a railway, and it's 4 million miles long. And I think about how to organize it and who's gonna live there, and anyway, the architecture. And so I'm building these 3D worlds in my brain, and I fall asleep that way. I do this almost every day when I'm home. It just gives me peace. And I try to build it. So I've been doing this like for 20 years now. It's world building. Science fiction authors do that, and
The
authors, right? Because before they write a book, they have to imagine the whole world in which the
world.
story is going to happen. So I do this to fall asleep. It's the way my brain works.
Many novels could come or many movies could come
Yeah,
from
I'm
that.
not good at fiction. I tried it. But I'm pretty good at nonfiction. I can write pretty well. And so people could, check out my Substack, fourthcivilization.substack.com, where every 2, 3 weeks, I write something. And the last one, I think we discussed it, was the geopolitics of cosmolocalism, in which I try to explain our market state in the commons interacted on the global stage.
Yeah, so for folks who are curious, we would definitely encourage you to tune in to Michelle's Substack. And also, we're curious, what do you think is childlike wonder in your own life across personal and professional? What role do you think that plays?
I think it's a bit difficult for me, and the way I solve this is through traveling. So for me, nothing beats being in a new place that I've never been, and I'm just in awe. And again, it's a bit silly, but instead of visiting like a tourist, I just go left, right, left, right, left, right, and I do this, because I want to discover how the people live there. I don't want to visit the cathedrals and the museums. I just basically want this feeling of like, you
Living
know
as if you're a local.
yeah, yeah. And so whenever I'm in a place, I'm always like, oh, I'm in Rio de Janeiro, I'm in this place, I'm in that place, and I just walk. It's a very European thing. There's books about this. In French, we call it flâner. It's
Flâner,
directionless wandering. But I'm in awe.
wandering,
I love cities. I love you. I love like going in Istanbul, for example, and seeing all these craftspeople that are still working there on the streets. Like I'm in heaven. I don't need. And I'll continue another thing. I have 4 children, and the only thing I need to be happy is to be around my children. And I'm instantly happy when I'm around my children. I don't need them to do anything. I don't need them to be anything. I'm just like happy that they're in the world, and that they're finding themselves and being creative. And I'm just like, wow. And I've always been that way. And it's maybe because I was alone as a child that I can appreciate that so much, because I know what I was missing. And so for me to have been an only child with two orphan parents, and to now be a happy father with 4 happy children and a great wife, just amazing. I say, okay, I may have fucked up a lot of things in my life, but like, I'll be happy when I leave for the other plane. I will say, yeah, I did it. I did this. I turned that around.
that's so
Anyway,
beautiful.
yeah.
That's so beautiful. And for our audiences who are curious to reawaken the sense of wonder, what simple things, like daily simple things that you would recommend them to try?
That's a hard question. because it may not work for everybody, but I think I start my day with reading. But reading in a particular way, right? I take notes. I read 90 minutes only, 3 books, 30 minutes each. And then I meditate about my reading. So I think, what did I learn today? Did anything I read today change my vision of the world? Did anything I read today connect to other books I may have written some years ago? And so I read slowly, much less than other people in academia, but I can talk for hours about every book I read because, and I think it doesn't matter even if you read 15 minutes, but it's over time it changes you. It gives you a depth. And that's the big problem with, with computers. I don't open my computer before 1 p.m. because I know it turns my brain to mush, literally. Your
It's super
It
fragmented.
fragments your and so the capacity, to have long thoughts in depth, I think that can only come from reading. And so I urge everybody, just read a little bit. If you don't have time, don't worry. 15 minutes, who doesn't have 15 minutes? But if you do it every day, it will change your life.
And they can read on their mobile phone. Right? It was like app,
Yeah,
or you
there's
recommend a
something.
physical book.
Yeah, because the thing is, so unless you have e-ink, right, like a Kobo or something, but if you read on the computer, there's actually not a fixed surface. What you get is you're bombarded with photons, and your brain imagines it's a text, but it's not. And this has been proven. This has been tested. People don't retain nearly as much when they read on a screen. It's like 40%. Don't do it. I mean, do it if it's like a working thing. But if you really want to think, you have to read a physical book or have a Kobo with e-ink, which is also fixed. It really affects the brain.
Okay, good advice.
Yeah, yeah,
I always struggle with reading on the computer. I would prefer to grab a physical book and read it. And there's
yeah,
something
yeah. I do the same.
unique
I don't,
about reading through a physical book.
I'll scan articles. I'll scan them, but I will never read them on the screen. If it's
Yeah,
important
I
enough,
sometimes will
then I'll
print
print
it
it out
out.
and I Google. Yeah,
Yeah, see, Sam, I read very slow too. Like I'm the
yeah,
slowest to read. Like I read so slow, and I have come back and reread. So
yeah, yeah.
I hear
So
you.
here's what I do. Okay, let me just finish with this. So I read the book, I take notes. When I finish my book, I reread my notes. And when I finish my notebook, I reread the whole notebook with 4 or 5 books. So this means I have engaged with these ideas 3 times, right? Which
So
is
you
not
read, you take notes, and then you read the notes
So I read the
afterward.
notes of the book when I finish my book. I reread the notes on the book. And when I finish my
Mm,
notebook, I reread the notebook an extra time. So I've basically read these ideas 3 times. Plus, I
three
think
times.
about them, right? I make half an hour every day where
Mm,
I think about what I've read. And so that creates anchoring, right? It
mm,
creates neurological connections in your brain. So you remember much, much more than if you don't do it. So then I have a few more tricks. Let me just quickly share them with you. So
yes.
you have to mix temporalities. So I read macro history for big, big time. But when I travel, I read specific books about specific periods and specific people, like the Vikings, the Incas, the Aztecs. So I can go from the concrete to the long term. And then
Mm,
I scan the internet. That's for the short term, and I read essays. So you have to think. Somebody writes an article for the internet. He worked on it a few days maximum. Somebody who writes an essay might have worked weeks or months on it, and somebody who's written a book has worked a year or more on it, right?
yeah.
So you mix temporalities. I think that's very useful as well. So your brain can go from the short to the long and back. You get this flexibility in your brain if you do that. You can,
Mm, yeah. I'm not frozen. I'm just closing my eyes to
yeah, yeah,
process
yeah.
the
I know you do
information.
that something.
It helps because I get sensitive to, so it helps me to only process one information through the sound. I feel like that actually resonates with the word integration. it does tie back to all the ideas that we've talked about. I think one way to find this midway, this integrative way beyond the duality, beyond yes, no, right, wrong, left, right, and one or the other is to actually read about them, learn about them, be open minded, and constantly take note and then reread your notes and then rethink and then ask guiding questions in terms of does that help to change or not change what I'm currently thinking? And that takes a lot of repetition. It takes a lot of patient reading, and it does take careful selections in terms of the forms, the short form, the mid form, or the long form. So it's a lot of weaving and integration with open mind, yes, still a very clear anchoring point because everyone has their own thinking. So it's all about how has they changed it? Have I improved it? And then coming back to everybody built their own world. Like you build world through your imagination before bed. And some other people may build world to maybe the world for them is their family. Maybe for some people, the world for them is the local community. Maybe for some others, the world is the physical world as of now. Maybe it's a country, maybe it's a global thing. So I feel like everybody is building their world by what they have come to truly knowing. And the integration takes a lot of learning, selection, and repetition.
You are what you pay attention to, right? That's who you become. And so this is the danger of our world, is they are stealing your attention away. You don't want to be a person who gets manipulated and whose attention wanders to what they want you to follow. You have to have your self-sovereignty, as you say, is also taking charge of your attention. You have to be the master of your attention.
Yes. Someone has once said in the podcast is to align your intention with your attention. I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah,
is
I agree with that. Yes.
such an important mini first step. And I
Yeah, yeah,
think
yeah.
before we venture into the bigger mission of world building that takes a lot of coordination and building networks, something that we can do at least within ourselves is to start to read and be selective what we read and not just read but intentionally repeat and then integrate in terms of our worldview as of now and see how that evolve as we continue to read, to align our intention with attention through reading. That's so beautiful. Oh my goodness. We need to stop now because it's
I
already so
feel
long.
wise when I talk to you.
Maybe I'm helping you to integrate also from this perspective. As we conclude, what do you think is your magic?
Well, I think that I never speak without feeling what I say. So I have a lot of people, I'm not saying this to brag, right? This is not what it's about. But I have a lot of people saying that I changed their lives, and it's not my intention. But if you speak true to yourself, right? So not to show that you know things, that you want to convince people. No, you just speak the truth as you experience it, as you seek it. I think that gives you power, because when I give a lecture, I know people are like transfixed, because it comes from a deep place. It's not bullshit. I can be wrong, of course, about what I'm saying, but it's something that has been digested, and I think that's magic. What do they say again, the Greeks? Truth, the true, the beautiful, and the good. I'm not good at the beautiful. I try to be good, but I think I'm mostly oriented towards the true. Everybody has his own way of prioritizing these three things, and I think for me it's the true. I'm really seeking the truth.
Yeah. And
To
I
the degree
think
that
the
human
good,
beings can know the truth, I am seeking that truth.
I love that. I think the truth, the good, the beauty, they're all very subjective. Even truth. I mean, yes, research can potentially find the absolute truth, but even that we have limitations. No research is perfect. So I feel like it's all alignment. It's all alignment. I think the truth is in alignment with what this is currently.
Yeah, and I
And
also
it will
think
evolve.
I think when you're So I am not enlightened or anything. I'm, not very particularly wise or anything, but I do think I'm self-actualized, right? I do think that at some point something happens that you're like, you feel you're aligned, you found your purpose. I have definitely found my purpose when I was about like 42 years old, and that changed my life. So that process of integration is, I think, worth striving for. You can't control it fully, and then but there's suddenly like you get that gift where the things come like together, and then you can. So there is Erich von Neumann. He's a Jungian psychoanalyst. He wrote about central version. And he said, until you're 35, you have to adapt to the world. Basically, you have to work on digesting all your inheritances, your culture, your country, your parents, your education, and make sense of what the world is giving you. But then ideally, you then become, say, so now I will no longer adapt the world. I will no longer adapt to the world. I want to change the world. I want to adapt the world to what I can bring to the world, right? And yeah, and so I think that's what I did. And yeah, it's a very good book, The Evolution of Consciousness. I think it's called, by Erich von Neumann, which is
It
quite
up.
fascinating. And what he does in that book is he looks at the evolution of mythology over time in the whole world and how it reflects the evolution of the human psyche, and how we got more mature over time as well, and how mythology reflects that. It's a fascinating book. And then there's also a really nice book that
Human
I recommend.
evolution of consciousness?
Yes, The Evolution of
Yes.
Consciousness. And then there is a book called The Varieties of
Okay.
Religious Experience from William James, where he talks about once born and twice born people. Once born people, they live in a good time, a good village, good parents, so they fit. But that also means they don't have to ask too many questions. And then some people, like me, we're born and something doesn't work. Like something is wrong with the operating system. You're in the world, but you're not of the world. That's a kind of gnostic. It's called the gnostic condition.
Yeah, I
And
feel like
these
an
people have to go.
outsider all the time.
Yeah, and these people have to go through a crisis, the dark night of the soul. But when they come out of it, they're actually richer than the other people because they had to go through all these experiences to find their meaning. And so the book from William James is about all the founders of great religions, basically the Reformation founders, the Presbyterian, Methodist, all these. And he describes their life, and it fits that pattern. So these people are generally unhappy in their youth, and then something happens, they get integrated, and then they do these amazing things. They create, new social movements, and they have millions of followers, and they create new worlds.
It's such a great pleasure to have this wonderful, multi-layered, integrative, expensive, yet anchoring conversation with you, Michelle. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, not only learned wisdom, but lived and integrated wisdom with us. And nobody is perfect. And I think what's really important is we keep going. We just keep building. I think that's the only action that we can do. Keep learning and keep building and keep
Yeah.
weaving and keep
Until we
integrating.
die. When we stop
Until we,
learning, we're dead.
yeah, that's so
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you,
Thank you.
Michelle.
You're also, I have to say, you're a very stimulating host, and yeah, I think you bring the best out of people. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Yeah, yeah. That's what we do here all the time in Thailand.
Yeah, that comes to me intuitively. It's like how
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
do
It's a
this
great
and I also
gesture.
do this.
Yeah. You know what it means, right? I honor the God in you, right? So it's a sign of deep respect for every other person as representing the divine. I think it's a great way to greet people.
Yeah. And that's how we greet aliens too. It's all coming back in a full circle.